So here we have a classic from 1992. Consider this a blast from the past, if you will. This is a fragrance by Ralph Lauren. I'm sure a lot of people know what this is, especially if you were heavy into fragrances in the 90s. This one is called Safari. I'm excited to give you my thoughts on this classic, so make sure to stay tuned. Now, before I begin today's episode and I give you my thoughts on Safari by Ralph Lauren, which is a 1992 fragrance, I'll tell you all about it. The smell, the performance, longevity, comparisons. I've owned this for several years now. I do want to start the video off first by saying that if you're a fan of fragrance-related content, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified whenever I do upload these daily videos to YouTube. And of course, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or if you took something of value from today's episode. It would really mean a lot to me. Now, all things considered, this is a fragrance that has been around for several decades now, and I think it goes without saying that it's probably been reformulated a number of times. As a matter of fact, I smell it and it still has this classic sort of a barbershop, old world feel to it, and I really do enjoy the smell. However, I don't think it's going to last as long as it once did. And so if you had the opportunity to pick this up in the early 90s when it first came out, or any time in the 90s, I'm thinking, you probably experienced a great longevity from it. You notice that especially with the sandalwood and the oak moss and the leather and some of these heavier notes that are in the dry down, they really created this enormous longevity. I don't think you'll get that from this fragrance anymore, but it's still very pleasant, very bright, very upbeat. As a matter of fact, you look at the note breakdown, it has carnation, bergamot, artemisia, there's lavender, there's coriander, there's a couple of floral ingredients in there as well, including jasmine, although I do find the floral ingredients to be a bit on the synthetic side, but nevertheless, I'm excited to give you my thoughts on the smell. Let's go ahead and start things off with a quick look at the presentation. So right in the opening of this fragrance, you are going to get this aromatic component. It's a bit citrusy, but all the citrus ingredients in here are fairly nondescript. There isn't anything special or instantly recognizable. It just kind of smells like bergamot, like this general sort of nondescript freshness, and I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. I do get the carnation, the lavender, and the coriander, so it has this spicy component to it. The artemisia in here isn't too sharp. If you've smelled fragrances, like there was one by Jean Paul Gaultier called Le Beau Mall, not Le Beau, but Le Beau Mall. That one had a lot of artemisia in it, or wormwood, if you will. Also absinthe by Nasomato. It doesn't have that kind of a sharpness, and as a matter of fact, the greenness from this fragrance is coming from the oak moss in the dry down, but it's a very neutered sort of an oak moss. It doesn't have that virility that it once used to have, and I'm not saying that I smelled this right when it came out in 1992. I actually haven't owned a bottle of this fragrance until the last few years, although I'm sure I've smelled this on other people, but at the time I was very young and green myself, so I didn't know what they were wearing, of course, and I would never muster up the courage to ask, but nevertheless, I do think this fragrance is green, it's aromatic, it's a little spicy, but not spicy in the way of like a cardamom or a saffron or one of these extroverted spices. It's rather smooth and subtle, and the coriander I think is a really nice touch. Now, carnation is a beautiful ingredient, and when I think of carnation, I think of fragrances like Equipage by Hermes, and it has this classic, some might even say barbershop type of a vibe to it. In the dry down, the leather isn't too apparent. It's not like a leather that I would equate to the leather smell in some other really popular fragrances like Ombre Leather by Tom Ford or anything like that. So it's very smooth, it's very green, it's woodsy, the carnation. The jasmine is a bit synthetic, but it does clean up the heart a little bit, and the coriander in the opening is not, over dominant or anything like that. I do find this to be a pleasantly aromatic fragrance. It's green, it's a little floral in a synthetic way, it's a bit fresh in a nondescript way, and it does have this old world charm to it, but I think somebody who's well groomed, especially if you have a fresh shave, you put this on, I think it's definitely going to give off that vibe of a well groomed classic gentleman. Now, all things considered, I do have to be honest with you, the longevity isn't there. So I'm getting about 5 hours on my skin, and I know that that wasn't the case when this fragrance first came out. So I do think that over the past few decades, the reformulations have really taken their toll on this fragrance, and as a result, it's been adulterated. But nevertheless, if you're looking for something fresh, floral, carnation, lavender, aromatic, clean smelling, but also with a classic touch. Check out Safari by Ralph Lauren. I'm sure you can get a bottle online for a decent price. I know I did a few years ago. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. Now, first up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, I do consider this fragrance to be unique for its time. Of course, the genre has evolved in so many different ways, and it does have some green elements. As I mentioned, there's patchouli, there's oak moss, and these are ingredients that have been done and overdone in the late 70s and 80s. And of course, with this being an early 90s release, it kind of borrowed a little bit of that green dry down, but it did its own thing with that aromatic opening and the citrus, the carnation, so on and so forth. Longevity on the current formulation is about 5 hours. Projection was okay for the first half hour of application. It radiated within an arm's length. It became an elbow's length scent right around hour 3, a skin scent right around hour 5. In terms of the versatility, I think you can wear this one dressed up or dressed down, if I'm being honest. It might appeal to somebody who's a little bit older just because of the time of its release. It might sort of conjure up that nostalgia. I do think it's masculine leaning, and I think it's great for the hotter weather, if I'm being honest. If you're wearing it indoors, you can wear it all year round. As far as the presentation is concerned, it definitely has a classic presentation, and I really do enjoy it, the leather feel on the box, and I do like the pattern on the glass here. My final verdict on this fragrance is, if you're looking for a classic, aromatic, slightly fresh, and earthy dry down, check out Safari by Ralph Lauren, a classic from 1992. But now I want to hear from you guys. Do you have any experience with this fragrance? Is this one that you used to own? Please leave your comments down below. I love the interaction. I also love to hear from people who say they have had experience with some of these old school, heavy hitter, blast from the past types of fragrances. I personally feel as though they have a very special place in the industry. And, when I purchase fragrances, I don't discriminate. So I buy really expensive fragrances, inexpensive fragrances, recent releases, old school fragrances, so on and so forth. So drop your comment below. Always happy to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video and if you took something of value from today's review, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. It's absolutely free and it would mean so much to me. Hit the bell and give it a thumbs up. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.